specifically looking at data, how it has helped or not helped solve this issue of tax foreclosure in Detroit, how hard it can be to get data from the government when the perception, right or wrong, is that you're sort of like muckraking, like trying to look at bad stuff, which isn't comfortable. And of course, when you're looking at something like tax foreclosure and the seizure of land and the auctioning of land to most often people who live outside of Detroit, it's not something that makes anybody really comfortable. So it's not really easy to get good data. So this is kind of like a summarization of a multi-year journey to try to make some kind of change. And we do have a celebrity here. This is my colleague, Matt Campbell, who does a lot of the programming for our awesome website. But so on how hard it can be to get data and how uncomfortable it is, I wanted to start just by sharing this short quote. This is from a book about the Flint water crisis by Anna Clark called The Poison of the City. This is basically a quote from an exasperated activist who'd been trying to convince people for a long time to understand that there was something wrong with the water in Flint. And she says basically the bottom line is stop trying to come up with ways to try and hide the lead. You should be looking for the high lead. That's your job as the DEQ. When you find it, you tell us, do your job the way the EPA intended for you to do it. And this is something you encounter a lot when you're looking for uncomfortable things. People are very happy to share data, unsurprisingly, if it makes the city look really nice. How many new buildings have we built? How many people, have moved downtown? Like, how many road miles have we paved? Things of that nature. But of course, to make civilization work, there's lots of things that you have to look at to make the world better that aren't particularly nice, and that do raise alarms and when someone goes and asks for it. So I'm going to share some examples of how we've gotten data over time to help illuminate what's happening with tax foreclosure. And then there's a little bit of a happy ending on a part of it, showing how data has been used recently to get what I think is a pretty significant policy win. So we've heard people talk about tax foreclosure in bits and pieces in some of the other sessions. We just jumped to kind of like the money shot on here, the overwhelming, red blob map of how many foreclosures there have been. So Detroit has about 350,000 properties, and over the last decade and change, a third of them have gone through tax foreclosure, which in a super nutshell, Michigan has the most aggressive tax foreclosure laws in the country. It's got to at least tie whoever else out there might be, sleeper as aggressive. But it basically, since 1999, the basic shape of it is that if you owe even $1 from 2 years ago on your property taxes, you forfeit your property to the county, and you have a short period of time to pay off your tax debts, or they auction it to the highest bidder. Okay? And so this is the range, and you can see, like, Jerry, which neighborhoods this has happened in? It has happened in almost all of them. The ones where there aren't a lot, if you look at it, it's like a golf course and a cemetery, like a few neighborhoods, and then sort of like the greater, downtown area has not had that many. Now, at the present moment, for as much progress as maybe been made on this in some ways, the present moment in Detroit, there are more than 45,000 properties that are still subject to tax foreclosure in 2020. And if you look inside of that, and this is data that we have on our website where you kind of mix and match different data fields, of those 45,000, more than 33,000 of properties at risk for foreclosure next year are occupied and residential. So this is not something, it's sort of it's more than an interesting quirk, and I won't go too deep into it, but the actual intention of this fast-track tax foreclosure law when it came into being in 1999 was to reduce the number of vacant properties in Michigan by speeding up the amount of time it took to seize a truly abandoned property from an owner who had walked away and put it back into productive use. So we had the mortgage foreclosure crisis happen, we had property values fall really far, we had just almost a complete loss of service delivery in Detroit for a while. And so you have occupied homes with owner occupants who really don't want to lose their home, just feeling this tremendous pressure of these debts that start to balloon underneath them. So quick, just kind of the shape of where this came from, if you think, the mortgage foreclosures really started to happen in Detroit, like 2006, 2007. Tax foreclosure was a real follow-on phenomenon. You had such a tremendous loss of property value in the city, and the city did not reassess its taxes downwards, as we heard in another session too. So, you might be paying year in property taxes on a home that you couldn't sell for $15,000 or even less in some cases. But the city's aggressively pursuing getting this money and then working with the county to auction the properties after only 3 years. And even with that decline that you see in the last couple of years on the number of properties at the auction, there's a complicated set of reasons for why that is, but the important part behind the scenes is that we've sort of leveled out now the number of properties that are tax delinquent, that are the debts that are ballooning for the interest that's owed on them, just the number of people that are behind has not really changed that much over the last several years. We sort of bottomed out around this 40,000 mark. Now, context for how Detroit has been affected versus other communities in Michigan. So the foreclosure law works the same everywhere. It applies the same in Wayne County as it does in Keweenaw County or in Ingham County or wherever. So this is from data I got from the state treasury. You can see that Wayne County alone has more, has as many tax foreclosures essentially as the rest of the entire state does. And to break this down a little bit more, upper left, that blue slice represents the 7% of people who live in Detroit versus the rest of the state. And then in the upper right, that 7% of people have borne 62% of all the tax foreclosures that have happened in all of Michigan. And then to bring race into it, I guess, if you look at the demographic compositions here of the state versus Detroit, you have a state that's 80% white, and then you have a city that's 80% African American. So I'm not a lawyer on these fronts, but and I know that the ACLU and we have folks here who actually brought a case against the city and attempted to bring a case against the county that reference things like the Affirmatively Fair Housing Act, where even if a policy is supposed to be applied neutrally, it's disproportionately affecting a minority population, and something has to change with how it's done. So you can clearly see that that's happening in Detroit with tax foreclosure. There's a lot going on in this graph, so I'm going to be a tour guide and point to kind of one line at a time. This always pains me to say, but like this stupid graph is something that I probably spent about a year working to assemble because it was data that I had tried to FOIA from the county treasurer's office, and it just was not happening. It was data related to the unique relationship that Michigan has created between cities and their counties when it comes to property tax collection. So I want you to bear with me, so this stuff's not like, you know, actually for this graph, some of you love this stuff obviously, but the dynamic that I have found over time to be the real reason why this issue, or to my mind the main driver why this issue hasn't changed, is how profitable it is for the county to be the debt collector on delinquent taxes. I think there's more that goes into it, but I think that we would be foolish if we didn't think the fact that late taxes were profitable for the county was not the main reason why the county didn't do more to change things. And so the 15-second version of this, I'll give you more demo time, but in Michigan, cities try to collect all their property taxes in a given year. And if they come up short, you come up $50 million short on your property taxes. So you've got a big Kickstarter round, right? Cities are like, oh no, all my backers are going to help me pay for fire and police and schools and everything else. If you come up short, you go to the county and you say, county, I was $50 million short this year. The county borrows $50 million and it gives it to you. So the city's made whole immediately. There's actually no interruptions. It makes sense under normal circumstances, but it's almost like having a store where even if you have no customers, somebody, your uncle's guaranteed to pay for all of your inventory. You can have people actively not paying property taxes, but the county's going to borrow the property taxes and give it to you. Makes sense in a way, right? Because municipalities get to operate without any interruption. You just know what the size of the check is that's coming every year. But then the county becomes the debt collector. They put 18% interest on top of it. They put fees and penalties and fines on top of it. And after 3 years, as a last resort, they auction your property. And it turns out that that's a very profitable endeavor for Wayne County in this kind of environment. And so the important lines here. Now everybody loves spaghetti graphs with tiny types. So here's what we're looking at here, okay? So this is 2009, this is 2016. This was the range that I was able to get this data for. This blue line, this is over 300 million here, is where this starts. This line is the amount of money every year that Wayne County paid out to its constituent communities that they did not collect in property taxes. And it's mostly Detroit. They did not, in this data, break out Detroit, but Detroit has 80 to 90% of the delinquency in the county. So it's a good proxy for Detroit. And then this red line above it is the amount of money that they ultimately made back on these loans. They're essentially loans. They forward the money that they need to get the money back. And then this green line here is that this difference becoming the surplus over time. So from 2009 to 2016, $340 million into Wayne County that they would not have made if people paid their taxes on time. And then that works out to between 40 to 60, $35 million a year. And if you look at more recent county budgets where they break this out, they'll say that they, this year, we transferred $30 million from the fund. I think it was $30 million in 2018. And so when I say transfers, taxes typically go towards, well, they always go towards specific purposes, right? There are villages that are earmarked for certain things. All of the surplus that they get is completely unattached to anything that they have to do, that anything specific they have to do. So it goes in the general fund and they use it for, they can make payroll with it, they can pay pensions with it, they can buy snow plows. My favorite quote about it, there was an interview with the county commissioner in Wayne County who was so excited about these transfers because they could buy like snow plows, and all the thinking about the money was completely disassociated from where it was coming from and what was happening in the city due to it. And you can imagine how hard it is to get somebody to stop doing something if that's how much they're profiting from it, and because Wayne County was very close to the line of insolvency itself. In fact, let me see. So this is from Wayne County's readjustment report. So this was, shortly after Detroit's bankruptcy, there was talk of Wayne County getting an emergency manager, and so they did a bunch of readjustments. And this is not, when I say that this delinquent tax stuff was helpful to them, it's been marquee helpful. So in this line it says, we had an accumulated deficit ballooning to $150 million at the end of 2013, which was covered by transferring funds from the county's delinquent tax revolving fund. While these transfers resolved the accumulated deficit, they masked the real problems and exhausted the county's liquidity. So this accumulation from people paying their taxes late and the auction were really what did the heavy lifting to get them out of emergency management bankruptcy type situation. And they continue to rely on it to this day, even though the county executive has gone so far as to call it blood money. This is from a radio show where I asked if that's why they continue to do tax foreclosure the way they do. And he said, no, that would be blood money. I mean, there's no doubt that the revenue is helpful, but anybody who would want to keep the status quo in order to bring in the revenue shouldn't be in government. And so over time, by pushing on this stuff, we've been able to bring more awareness to this. And I do want to get to kind of like a bright side thing on this. Obviously, it's a long story for 15 or 20 minutes, but some of the nature of the work that Matt and I and our colleagues do with our mapping company is we really try to provide great parcel level property information, ownership, zoning, taxes, even sometimes property conditions and occupancy and land use, mixing in different data sets. And so one project we had worked on during the city's bankruptcy is we were hired to hire Detroit residents to literally go and visit every single parcel of property in Detroit, take a picture, make a note about how land was being used, if the property was vacant, is it blighted, okay, like for practical terms that meant is it missing windows, is there a hole in the roof, is something collapsing, things of that nature. And it was a very illuminating project. It was called the Motor City Mapping Project, and it was really, that project was the first time that we were able to combine property conditions, tax foreclosure risk, and occupancy all together to really show beyond a shadow of a doubt, you're not foreclosing on vacant homes, you are foreclosing on occupied homes. And we can look and see that if you foreclose on these occupied homes, you're going to make the next 10,000 blighted vacant houses. And so an issue like solving tax foreclosure is really the sister or kindred to solving vacancy and blight and everything that comes along with that in the city. And what we were able to do over time as we got more evolved, this wasn't always beloved by local government and funders, but we got more evolved going like, okay, we can look at a house, take a picture of a house, but like, who should we work with to have enough trust to actually go and talk to people in houses that are going into foreclosure or that have experienced it? And so we did a lot of work where we actually went out and we interviewed people to see what happened after these tax foreclosures took place. And as you can imagine, the results were not pretty in the majority of cases. So a lot of evictions, a lot of people just deciding to move out. They get shady offers from the new owner, these kind of like dubious land contracts that we talked about earlier, offers to buy the house back for, ludicrous sums of money, things of that nature. But what this did evolve into, starting a couple of years ago, was another highly coordinated, well-resourced project that basically said, okay, we can try to save people from tax foreclosure, like right before the auction, or we can start working with residents to attack the problem upstream. Like as soon as somebody is late on their property taxes, is it possible for a neighbor, somebody who they may not know but who lives in the same adjacent area, to get trained by a housing counselor to actually go, knock on the door, let them know the situation is happening, drop off information, and if they want to, engage in a conversation that helps to understand how many people are renters, how many people are the homeowner, how many people might be in a family property where the parent passed away and now there's an issue with the deed, they got to go to probate court or something like that. They may not even be paying attention to the property taxes. It happens all the time in Detroit. People lose family homes accidentally. And to ask really important policy questions like, how many of you would be eligible based on your income for this property tax exemption, which says in Detroit that you don't need to pay property taxes at all. If you're a homeowner that makes below a certain amount of money, depending on your household size, you don't pay property taxes. And so it's kind of overwhelming, but maybe not surprising that 3/4 of the people that were interviewed would qualify for this property tax exemption, which means that they should not be paying property taxes in the first place. And this was this ACLU case that was talked about. They said, get off the stage. The ACLU settled with the city where, like Bernadette said, you had to apply to apply. You go downtown in person to get the application mailed to you, and then you had to, the notary was the least of it. So you have kids, show me report cards. Like, you can get stuff like that. I want to say this is like a totally loosey-goosey world, right? But when you have a situation with 40% poverty and a problem chewing into your landscape this bad, incredibly high hurdle to get that. And so there was a major concerted effort to try to get the city of Detroit to cancel the property tax debts for those who owed taxes but shouldn't have had to owe them. And there was a compromise that was reached recently. We don't know how it's going to work out yet, but basically using the data about how many people are in this situation, the mayor did announce, the mayor and the county treasurer, that if you get this property tax exemption and you owed taxes from years prior, they'll remove all the penalties and fees and interests and make it a much longer timeline for the payback. We don't know how it's going to work out yet, but I do consider things like that, sometimes that's all you get in this world for fighting and snarling and pushing and working with people for years and years and years. You finally show enough with the data that you kind of back somebody who doesn't want to change into a corner. I wish it didn't have to work like that, but it just seems like that's how it works sometimes. And so it's kind of a big deal because it's an admission that there is more that can be done, and we'll see how it works. This was literally from like a month ago. And I think I'd be remiss not to point out that, right now, probably not on Saturday, but starting only a couple days ago, the Michigan Supreme Court is actually hearing a very important case on tax foreclosure. It's interesting because it comes from an angle that is probably unexpected for many people that work on these issues, but probably is not unexpected for people for the lawyers in the room who are more accustomed to the way the world, actually works out more times than not, is that it's not a case that's being brought on behalf of like a poor family who lost their home and the home was over-assessed and they shouldn't have had to pay, or they didn't get weren't able to apply for the program. It is basically a property investor in Oakland County who was paying his taxes, but he accidentally underpaid by $8. Oakland County foreclosed on his property. They auctioned it for $20-some thousand. He wasn't even paying attention at the time, the way I understand it. He kind of came back a couple months later and was like, "What's this I hear about my property?" You know, they're like, "Oh, we foreclosed it and sold it." And he's like, "Well, I'll give you $8. And they're like, "It doesn't work that way, so it's gone." And he said, "Well, fine, then just give me, I owe you 8, you made 23 or whatever it was, give me the difference." And they said, "We can't do that, that's not how it works in Michigan." And so that's what he and the firm representing him really sunk their teeth into. They said, "No, this is not constitutional." I'm talking state constitution, talking U.S. Constitution, this is not constitutional. So you can't, I believe the line is you can't take a private property for a public purpose without just compensation. And so that's what they're specifically arguing. And it's really interesting to me because it's of all the things that are kind of wrong with this situation, it's very focused, it's a very conservative private property rights kind of an argument. And with all of the more progressive arguments you can make around this in a pretty purplish, state like Michigan, I wouldn't be surprised if he, genuinely wouldn't be surprised, even being cautious, that if he won that case and Michigan basically said we can't do tax foreclosure like this. And the reason that could be very important here is that it doesn't address the penalties and interests from people who pay late, but if you take away that profit motive, then it's just like, I don't know, how do we help people pay on time or something, I guess, the cash cow's over. So I don't know how that's going to play out, but it's interesting to me to have it happening right now. And maybe at this point, I don't know if that's, if anybody has anything they want me to turn back to or kind of drill into, or Nathan, if you do, but I kind of feel like if I talk about anything else right now, I'm just going to way overshoot.
Yeah, so we have time for like 1 or 2 quick questions.
Thank you very much for your work. I have used your website and the data you post quite frequently. Is the pay-as-you-state program official now, or does the state legislature have to do something to make it the law of Michigan?
I think the legislature has to do something, but I feel like it's that situation where they, the mayor is a pretty shrewd guy, I guess. I kind of feel like, it seems like one of those things where they feel like it's a done deal.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? We have an interesting situation. I think we can say a lot of good things about our mayor because he, was just a mess. You know what I mean? And he kind of really pushed people, I think, to be more accountable in certain ways and follow metrics. But in my opinion, graciously, like anybody, he's got blind spots. He has 3 things that he wants, 3 things that I remember anyways, and it was down more, but it was grow the population, eliminate blight, and build an inclusive city that doesn't push out the poor. And he really never talks about tax foreclosure, when it's the thing that seems to work against all those goals. And so I'm kind of happy whenever he acknowledges these things at all. And my understanding for why they didn't erase the debt is the argument was it wouldn't be fair to the people who shouldn't have had to pay either, but did. Which is kind of, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how you fix anything wrong in the world if that's the way you view it. Longer answer would be one, so I think there's a little bit more work to do, but my sense is that the apparatus is in place to do it.
Thank you.
Professor Soman, if you have a real quick question.
Yeah, this is real quick. So, thank you for a very insightful presentation. My question is this, that usually if you see a lot of people preferring to give up an asset rather than pay the taxes, that may be a sign that the tax rate is too high. Yep. Is there anything going into perhaps, I know you talked briefly about assessments, is there any thinking about possibly lowering the rate?
Detroit only makes 2%, maybe 2.5% of its annual budget from residential property taxes, so it's sort of odd from the city perspective that there's even been this much pulling of the blood from a stone, so to speak. I think it's more of a county thing. Wayne County gets 60% of its budget from property taxes, and I feel like I try to penetrate those conversations to see what people are really thinking, but I feel like that's when you're getting 3 closed doors down the way, or what the mood really is, to try to adjust those kinds we did have our first citywide reassessment in like 50 years, just a few years ago. Bernie had talked about that, and that's unconstitutional. I'm not an expert on that piece, but I guess initially you're supposed to reassess properly every year. This poverty tax exemption is the one thing that jumps out to me for like what would lower your property taxes. We're giving away a lot of property tax subsidies to developers right now, so it doesn't seem like there's a lot of coherence about what property taxes in Detroit want to be in the future, because we're like, Ford, you can develop the train station and we'll take $100 million off over the next 30 years. Meanwhile, you guys, it's going to be hard for you to apply to, get a small property tax break. We'll kind of piecemeal it together here. I've only heard vague conversations about, thinking about restructuring like the land value tax, or just something different that might reflect the city and what things are worth a little bit better. So I wish I had a better answer about like what might be next on like actual assessments. But right now it just seems like it's trying to normalize stuff and then make like random lists for different parties who have pain.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for coming, and thank you, Jerry,